In the blazing summer of 1876, the vast plains of Montana became the stage for a defining moment in American history, the Battle of Little Bighorn. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, driven by unyielding ambition and unwavering confidence, led his 7th Cavalry Regiment into battle, determined to crush the combined forces of the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. But as the dust settled, it became clear that Custer's pride had led to disaster, leaving a permanent mark on the American military's history. Come with us as we explore the intricacies of this infamous battle, unraveling the complex web of events that led to one of the most shocking defeats in U.S. military history. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. We're building a community of truth seekers and history enthusiasts, and your support means the world. Lieutenant Colonel Custer, driven by a fierce determination, decided on an immediate assault, aiming to prevent the enemy's escape at all costs. His bold approach was a testament to his belief in taking control of events rather than letting circumstances dictate the outcome. Custer's battle tactics were simple yet resolute. Surprise the enemy, gain the upper hand, and then trap them in a pincer movement. Unfortunately, this win-at-all-costs strategy failed to consider any possibility of defeat. Had Custer been in Major Reno's position, his aggressive tactics might have worked. However, Reno was not inclined toward reckless abandon. His leadership style avoided unnecessary risks, favoring caution over bold moves. Custer, expecting others to mirror his aggressive approach, proved to be a poor leader, failing to understand that not everyone shared his willingness to charge into danger. Even against overwhelming odds, Custer's plan might have succeeded if Reno had charged unhesitatingly into battle against the Hunkpapa warriors. However, Reno lacked the boldness and single-minded drive that Custer expected. Placing Reno in such a high-pressure situation, Custer set him up for failure, leading to hesitation and retreat instead of the decisive charge that was needed. Reno chose to dismount his men and form a skirmish line rather than press through the encampment, losing the initiative and momentum that could have been critical in facing overwhelming odds. Even if Custer's strategy defied common sense, Reno's decision to halt the attack reinforced the likelihood of a Native American victory. Unlike General Crook, who had retreated under the cover of his Crow auxiliaries a week earlier, Custer either failed to understand or stubbornly refused to accept the reality of his situation. Custer's bold, multi-pronged attack, had it succeeded, would have been hailed as genius. But once the momentum was lost, his divided forces became easy targets, picked off one by one with no chance of recovery. While Major Benteen and Major Reno managed to hold their positions, Custer did not. They adapted to the changing circumstances, setting up a defensive position on a hill that held off the attackers until they eventually withdrew on June 25th and 26th, allowing Benteen and Reno to survive. Custer is often unfairly depicted as an egotistical monster, but while he certainly had immense self-confidence, his greatest flaw was his inability to connect with other soldiers and officers. His charisma might have carried him through in battle, but his poor motivational skills and lack of empathy in daily army life alienated everyone except his superiors. Understanding why Custer was chosen to lead the 1876 expedition requires considering what his superiors wanted: action. Custer was a man of action, and they needed someone who would act decisively. Although the official purpose of the expedition was to encircle the Lakota and Northern Cheyenne and force them onto reservations, the true goal was to defeat them in battle. Custer was the ideal choice for Generals Sherman, Sheridan, and Terry because he wouldn't hesitate to strike quickly enough to prevent the hostiles from escaping. The campaign was built on the belief that by attacking villages and destroying homes, the Native Americans would be forced into submission. Custer was expected to deliver victory, but when the campaign failed, he became the scapegoat. The approach wrongly assumed that the warriors would only fight to protect their families, a belief that proved disastrously incorrect. After forcing General Crook to retreat, the Lakota and Northern Cheyenne were confident they could defeat a smaller force. Custer's desire for publicity is clear. Why else would he bring a reporter along against orders? His conversation with White Man runs him, a Crow scout, further illustrates his self-centeredness. Custer declared, "These people are troublesome and bother the white people and the Crows. Today, I'm going to give them a lesson. I'm going to beat you Crows and build a fort at the confluence of the Little and Big Horns, so you can live in peace." This would have literally and figuratively put him on the map. While some believe Custer had political aspirations, it's more likely he wanted to emulate Buffalo Bill Cody and recreate his acts of valor. Regardless of his motives, Custer's ego drove him to build his legend. When his luck finally ran out, his widow Libby worked to keep his legacy alive, even spreading the myth that Custer's body wasn't mutilated. As Tom Hatch notes in the Custer Companion, it's hard to believe this given that the Native Americans likely didn't even recognize Custer. Another misguided theory, proposed by Mari Sandoz in Crazy Horse, suggests Custer took a Cheyenne bride during his campaign. But history is often misleading, relying on imperfect evidence. In Custer's case, the truth is that he simply ran out of luck. His flaws caught up with him, not because he was a maniac or stupid, but because his ego led to poor decisions. Custer's superiors were well aware of his ego, but they also knew he was fearless and charismatic in battle. After the fact, claims that Custer disobeyed orders were used to shift blame onto him rather than those who appointed him. General Sherman and Sheridan, inspired by the success of Mackenzie's attack on the Kiowa, Comanche, and Southern Cheyenne at Palo Duro Canyon, wanted to replicate this strategy in the North. They chose a leader who would attack boldly and without hesitation, confident in his ability to strike quickly enough to prevent the Native Americans from escaping. Custer was their choice. While Custer's flaws certainly contributed to his downfall, the survival of Major Benteen and Major Reno suggests there were other factors at play. Some claimed that the Native Americans had superior weaponry, but this wasn't true. Although some had repeating rifles, their weapons were varied and often improvised. In contrast, the troopers were armed with the latest Springfield carbines, single-shot rifles that should have been easy to reload. However, the real problem was the lack of practice with these rifles, especially in adjusting the sights for different ranges. The troopers initially fired from a distance, but evidence suggests that as the battle moved closer, they overshot their targets, with bullets flying over the heads of their opponents. Reports from the village, including those from Hunt Papa's Moving Robe and Pretty White Buffalo, noted bullets shattering and rattling through the teepee poles. Although these observations were from the Reno fight near the village, it's likely this mistake occurred throughout the Battle of Little Bighorn. Richard A. Fox, using archaeological evidence, reconstructed a similar scenario, supporting what Moving Robe and White Buffalo observed. Military training at the time was minimal, contributing to the troopers' ineffectiveness in battle. The number of rounds allocated for target practice each year was so low that many troopers likely had little to no experience firing a rifle, let alone under battle conditions. In the chaos of combat, it was unlikely that anyone would remember to adjust their sights, and with weak leadership, it was improbable that clear commands to do so were given. However, the lack of military training wasn't just a problem for the 7th Cavalry. It was a widespread issue throughout the 19th century U.S. Army. Colonel Edward Settle Godfrey, a comrade of Major Benteen, suggested that dirty or corroded cartridges made it difficult to eject shells, sometimes requiring the use of a knife to remove them. Despite the claims, the facts do not offer strong support for this argument. Only 3 out of every 80 cartridge cases found in the area where Custer's men fought showed signs of scratching. At the Reno-Benteen defense site, the figure was similarly low, with just 7 out of 257 cases showing any evidence of scratching. This minimal data fails to explain Custer's defeat or to substantiate this particular theory. Custer's decision not to use Gatling guns has been pointed to as a cause of his downfall, but it more accurately reflects his aggressive approach. He saw no advantage in bringing along the Gatling guns, as they were ill-suited for attacking a Native American village, which was not a fortified military target but rather a community of homes likely to be abandoned at the first sign of battle. Custer considered the guns unnecessary burdens that would slow his men down, a critical disadvantage when the element of surprise was key. During the 1864 Battle of Adobe Walls, Gatling guns had been crucial in preventing Carson's troops from being overrun. However, Custer had no intention of adopting a defensive stance and likely wouldn't have known how to effectively deploy them even if he had. General Nelson A. Miles later expressed that he was not surprised by Custer's choice to leave the Gatling guns behind, stating that they were of little use in fighting against Native Americans. "They are worthless for Indian fighting," Miles remarked. The troops under Custer, weary from their overnight march, were undoubtedly fatigued, but this was a condition shared by all the men, not just those in Custer's command. Within the 2 detachments under his leadership, one group managed to rally and fight bravely, while the other fell into chaos. This difference in response might explain the varying Native American accounts, which some have used to question their reliability. While the exhaustion of the troops contributed to the defeat, it was a relatively minor factor, one that could have been mitigated with better leadership and tactics. Notably, after Custer's 5 companies were wiped out, the Native Americans who returned to confront the remaining 7 companies were repelled. This suggests that, had they acted in unity, the force could have been strong enough to stand a chance. As General Nelson Miles observed, no commander can win a battle if a significant portion of his force is out of the fight when the first shots are fired. If all of Custer's forces had attacked together as one, they might have overwhelmed the native warriors, who would have been preoccupied with protecting their families. Custer's military tactics always involved aggressive charges, ideally from multiple directions, a strategy he was committed to, despite its later perceived recklessness. However, Reno's charge lost momentum. Custer was delayed in finding a river crossing to coordinate with Reno's attack, and Benteen's detachment was not effectively engaged. Benteen, lacking clear orders on when and where to attack, merely followed his instructions to move south and southwest, engaging any native warriors he encountered. Colonel Edward S. Godfrey, who was part of Benteen's command but not present at the battle, later blamed Reno for retreating from the trees. He based this on a conversation he had in 1886 with Chief Gall. Benteen believed that if Reno hadn't retreated, the Native Americans might have withdrawn when faced with the possibility of confronting both Reno and Custer simultaneously. Godfrey's assumption seemed to rest on the idea that the U.S. Army could have won if not for tactical errors. In my view, the worst-case scenario would have been that more troops might have survived if they had been led to fight cohesively as a single, united force. The best-case scenario would have been that momentum alone could have turned the tide. Unfortunately, Reno's hesitation resulted in the demise of Custer's forces, who were not well prepared for defensive combat. It's evident that Custer's primary concern was preventing the Native Americans from escaping. This concern was shared by the entire U.S. Army, whose multi-pronged strategy was specifically designed to block any attempts at withdrawal. It's important to recognize that the Army's tactics targeted civilian encampments, based on the belief that warriors would prioritize their family's safety over engaging in battle. This strategy had proven successful in the Red River War in the Southern Plains just 18 months earlier. While General Terry led Gibbon's forces alongside his own, he effectively handed command of his troops over to Custer. Meanwhile, General Crook's detachment operated independently, which may have been a significant flaw in the campaign.